simple user experience. They want to know who their driver is. How do you put those two together? You match them with a digital application. And that matching is creating a harmony between somebody in need and somebody who has a need for that product. And that's an element that has to also be involved in what trust is all about and how trust is being communicated. Next slide, please. So how do we manage our brands? And this is another very important part, because most people think about the brand as a social brand, the brand that is communicated to the consumer. And how do we create trust in that element? Well, clearly we just spoke about some of the elements in the consumer brand in the previous discussion, how we drive brand. But there are three other brands which are parallel or come in synchronicity to that social brand. And one is the personal brand, is the brand of the leader, the brand of the entrepreneur, and how the values and the purpose of that individual and how they're communicating that to their stakeholders, to their customers, to their partners, to their entire supply chain. How are they, because often the leadership team or the owner of the company or the entrepreneur, the founder of the company, is one that imparts so much to their other stakeholders. And they create the trust in the organization. The trust is a very, very important element because it allows the other interactions to develop and evolve. So the developing of one's personal brand has to be clearly architected for understanding trust and evolving that purpose to your general audience. The second brand, which is very relevant, other than the social brand, which is communicated, is the brand of the employer. How does the employer interact with their employees and their market to develop an idea of inclusiveness, an idea of opportunity, an idea of the vision of the company, so that what's happening is that the future talent, which is the most critical element all around the world to really become competitive and sustainable, you need to attract those people. And you need to attract those people with a brand that is not only driven by consumer needs and self-interest, but one that's going to have a broader purpose of helping the planet, of helping the community, of allowing the new employee to create, innovate, collaborate, co-create. This has to be a whole different brand. That's why Google and the Microsofts of the world are really trying to develop that brand to communicate to potential employees who are their impetus for change and transformation. And then there's a third brand, fourth brand, which is the brand of the corporation. That's the brand of reputation. That's the way they get their investors. That's the way they communicate to a higher level of other stakeholders about who they are and what they perform and their return on investment and their key performance indicators. And we have to evolve those key performance indicators on the corporate brand level from only return on investment and profit and EBITDA to looking at social impact on community, on families, on education, and on the sustainability of our planet. So that involves the corporate brand, and that's why many corporations are transforming themselves from being just profit-centered to being stakeholder-centered. And the last element, which is evolving as the world becomes totally linked on real-time basis, is the global brand. And how do the institutions of the media and the other stakeholders and the networks of people communicating both false information and positive information, and they're affecting the brand and the reputation of a company on that level. So that has to be managed very, very carefully to keep it secure and keep the trust level very, very high, because it will affect the consumers, the future employees, and the future investors in your corporation based upon your global brand. So that involves reputation. Next, please. So These are the kinds of questions, if I was your CEO or the owner, which I'd begin to ask. And these are really the hard questions. I can't answer them, but only you can. You have to really ask the question, why does my brand exist? And which brand am I talking about? The 5 brands. And how are we focusing? If you're a founder of a new entrepreneurial venture, you have to manage your corporate brand for your investors very, very carefully. You have to also ensure that your social brand is being communicated and attracting and engaging. And of course, you have to be very concerned about your employer brand because you want to attract the best talent and create a co-created solution that will be innovative and differentiate you from the rest of the public. So why does that brand exist, and what effort are you putting into realizing that brand and transforming it just from a word on a page to something that's lived and earned and trusted? So I'm going to keep on coming back to that. How do we, as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a catalyzer of change, create trust in our brand? So then I would say the second hard question is, what role does your brand play in a stakeholder's life? Or what role does your purpose play in a stakeholder's life? So if you're in a B2B business and manufacturing hand sanitizer, a new very big product which people are needing these days, and price in America has gone up from $3 a bottle to $8 a bottle because the demand is so strong. But what role does it play in manufacture that hand sanitizer and the purpose of your company? Is it just to make money? Is it to keep our world safer? Is it to create cleanliness? Is to create security for the stakeholder, for the supply chain, for the partner? Are they willing to collaborate and co-create a more efficient supply chain so the price is cheaper and more efficient and more credible and more dependable? So we have to understand every level of the stakeholder chain, from customer all the way to community, and how trust is being affected in their lives and their decisions. The third question is, it's a litmus test, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but do the values which you put on your wall in your company, which you introduce in your handbook, in your corporation or your nonprofit, are they the same values which are embedded in the decisions you make on ingredients and on packaging, on disposal of your product? Is it the same values that you're using in communicating your message and the way you interview somebody to be employed, to be a future employee? Do you have the same care and compassion for that? How are you addressing the new mindset of those people who have been affected and lost, unfortunately, people through COVID, or experienced the COVID journey, which is quite powerful and quite transforming? How do we integrate that into our values and our mindset and our messaging for our companies? And what challenge does our brand solve? If our brand, even our social brand, if it's trying to create value for our customers, is it really creating value? Or is it just creating something else for us to buy or something else to divert us? Is it solving an important need for the consumer, for the society, for the community? And is it being effective in doing that? And the last question is, what would the world be different without your brand? Can the world exist without hand sanitizer? Can the world exist without Jahan's handcrafted projects? Can our community exist without those? Well, what would that mean? So those are really, really critical questions to take and work with your management team, and actually with your leadership and your management team together to really dive in. I think it's important for companies to pause and take some time before they're creating this new strategy, this transformation strategy. And that's the rationale for these master classes, which we're doing, is to take a breath and to really understand how we're searching for that key, that solution that the jester, the mullah, the hoja was looking for. and how important it is to look inside ourselves as well as looking outside ourselves for the solution. Next, please. So I want to just look very quickly how we define value in a strategic way in our brand. And this is important as well, because this is the value is the element which is the element in the transaction which the consumer and the supplier and the community exchange with you. So first of all, we have to define our value. And clearly we've talked about that as defining purpose and organizational values. The next thing we need to do is we need to design our value in our product with our brand, with identity of who we are as our purpose. And one of the ideas of the exercise in terms of the elevator pitch was to see how many people actually incorporated purpose in describing themselves. If you look at a traditional corporation, and I've done much consultation globally on this, you'll find that 7 out of 8 or 3 out of 4 companies will not even talk about purpose or values in describing their companies. They're going to talk about features, they're going to talk about benefits, they're going to talk about how much money they're saving and not how they're affecting their client. So because purpose and value is very critical and transformative in our new world, you have to see how you're incorporating that into your brand and how you're affecting your digital touch points. And then how you're creating value in terms of your communication. What is the image that you're creating? What people are you having to communicate your image? Are they people of trust? Are they people that communicate in their voice and in their presentation, that they appeal to this wide variety of people looking for change, from the next generation of Z generation, that's the younger under 20s, and the millennials, the 22s to the 38, 40s, Xers and the baby boomers and the seniors beyond that. So, and how are you networking that message? And then the last way you're creating value is through the impact. Are you driving advocacy? One of the most important things about brand is creating brand trust and brand love. But the extension of that is creating advocates. After you get somebody to engage in your brand, adopt your product, vote for your candidate, you have to keep them involved in your company or your government or your community. How do you do that? You get them to be advocates. It's what's called, in the marketing sense, post-purchase behavior. After you buy a product, you have to invest significant amounts of money in retaining that client, in engaging that man or woman in the value of your product. And actually, the goal would be is to have them become a champion, not only an advocate. The advocate might write you a good testimonial or might say a good word on LinkedIn for you, but the champion is actually creating a program which is going to be disseminated in your community and globally, and it'll have impact. It'll not only generate profit, but it'll also be scaled to create social impact on your environmental level and your community level. Next slide, please. So clearly, on that same level, trust has to be consistent to all your stakeholders. And one of the important tests for you is to create a stakeholder matrix and see if your message, your design, your supply chain, and you're actually investing in community to earn the trust of